Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Wednesday night DuoDive here on the Trusty Huckster Mercantile channel. Once again, joining in the DuoDive is Katie, the other half of the duo that we'll be diving in. So Katie from Vintage and Vinyl. So thanks so much for joining in again, Katie.
Absolutely, Patrick. I'm thrilled
Looking
to be
forward
here
to this
tonight.
evening. Looking forward to this evening because we have in a return visit, Sam, stud with a stash from Dining at Sea, sharing a different collection than than the last time he was on my channel. I think the last time you came on as a deep dive, I think that was on my channel by itself, and that was to cover your collection of travel menus. And you are completely responsible for my collection of travel menus and all of the money I'm currently spending trying to fill a collage frame so I can hang it up. But that's a whole nother conversation. That you have a very massive collection, as your little tagline there says. You're from Dining at Sea is on Instagram. Sam does not have a YouTube channel. But he is on Instagram under Dining at Sea, and that I don't think you've been posting as much lately. So I think holidays, things get in the way for that.
Yeah.
But you've posted an extremely attractive collection of menus. And tonight, it turned out that you started a secondary collection that was, I think, a spin-off of your travel menu collection. So why don't you go ahead and say hi, introduce yourself, tell people a little bit about yourself, and then how'd you start? What was your move into Perpetual Calendars?
Sure. So yeah, I'm Sam, Dining at Sea. It was definitely a COVID project. I had always been collecting them, but putting them online was sort of the COVID project. And life stuff happens, so I've definitely slowed down the posting, but the collecting has not. So that's I do need to get around it. My printer is actually where my scan everything is on the fritz, so that's also, I'm going to blame the printer, not me, for this problem. And so this other collection sort of happened sort of by accident because I like to collect ship-related things, as you might see. And I was just poking around on eBay one day, and I saw this, what I considered at the time a perpetual calendar. We can get into the semantics of that afterwards. But it's themed sort of with the American President lines, which is one of the ship companies that I collect most regularly. And I saw it. It was just a little desk calendar with the date, and it spins over, so you can change the date, and then the month and the day of the week. And it's a promotion between the American President lines and Sunset magazine, which I think still exists. It's like Sunset, the magazine of the West. So if anyone is from the West Coast, maybe you've heard of Sunset magazine. I had never heard of it before then. This probably dates to the early 1960s. I was trying to find a magazine of that era to also have tonight. Couldn't find one that would get here in time. But I think it's about dated to the 1960s. And I just looked at it and I was like, oh, that's a really cool spin-off of what I'm already collecting. So why not? And now I have two calendars, and I'm like, well, two calendars is a little bit more than I need because they do the same thing, but they're fun to collect. And I always keep my eye out when I'm going to stores or online for sort of other collectible ones.
And if you have more than one, it makes it a collection. So the one that you need is totally a collection. So let's back up a step and go into we won't go into the semantics yet of a perpetual calendar, but I'm going to give you full screen again. And why don't you actually show what makes what you have a perpetual calendar compared to traditional calendars that most of us are used to?
Yeah, so I think, this will just keep winding over. I'll wind backwards so you can sort of see, goes back. And then this also just tells you, turn slowly, change month. It's telling you, this is just going to keep going indefinitely. It doesn't really track anything like the year. So that's why, to me, it sort of starts out as a perpetual calendar because it's going to repeat every year. And so without fail, it doesn't matter what the day of the week is or where that falls in the year or where it falls in the calendar. It's always going to be correct because you can always change it to exactly what you need it to be.
And as you advance the day of the week or the day of the month, as you said, there was a little thing that says, change month. How do you do that?
Oh, sure. So these just have like little windy bits on the side.
We're so technical here. So we've got
Yeah.
the windy bits.
Windy bits. Make sure you do the windy bits. And so these are just like little rollers that are inside. See if I can take it apart.
No, you have to take it apart. But so each roller is controlled individually. One showing
the day of the week, and
and then the day of the week. Oh, okay.
Yeah. So they sort of, and they do roll independently, but sometimes they catch each other. So that is sort of, the basic. I would say this is a pretty basic style for kind of the perpetual clock. I think they can even probably be a little bit more basic. The other one I have is, I would say, probably the most basic version. It's a bunch of cubes that you just sort of like keep shifting.
Why don't you go ahead and show? Well, since you've tipped your hand, why don't you go ahead and show your other one?
So this is a pretty standard. It's pretty modern. I got this at the MoMA Design Store in New York City. Thought it was pretty cool. It's just sort of one of these ones where, again, you just flip the block. The gray one is the day of the week. Black, you can do whatever month it is. See if I can put it back together correctly. And then, these have all the numbers on them, so you just flip to the right day as you kind of advance through the month.
So again, it's just a case of the perpetual calendar because it's always going to be accurate no matter what your year. Right. And so when we were, as he alluded to, and we started things out, there is kind of I don't even know if it's a true definition, but there's more of a technical definition of a perpetual calendar, and then maybe more the colloquial definition of a perpetual calendar. So as you've kind of looked into it, and this is one of the cases where all three of us have a little bit of information that we're going to share, and we each have a little bit of a collection to show. But let's, starting with Sam, is because you were the one that first, started off by saying, maybe we'll just kind of get away from the semantics. Well, time to bring in the semantics. What else? What is another definition of a perpetual calendar compared to what the two examples that you just showed?
Yeah. So I think the more I think about it, I would consider these types of calendars to be more perennial calendars, if that makes sense. Like it's every year it's going to be the same, right? Every January 5th is going to be the same January 5th on this calendar because there's no year or moon phase or any other extra thing associated with it. So to me, the perpetual calendar is sort of taking into account those things that aren't, being shown here. What's the year? What's other sort of extraneous data that might be included? I think the year is the big one. I think for me, a perpetual calendar has to include the year and has to advance in such a way that like it all follows and can be good for 100 years and not ever fall out of sequence.
And so one of the things that I was doing in preparation for the DuoDive, and this is what Katie and I, whatever we have as our guests, we always try and do a little bit of research. It's very difficult to actually research quote unquote perpetual calendars because I know a lot of what comes up is the idea of the design of a perpetual calendar in a watch. And I think Katie might be able to talk a little bit more about that. Yes, that's a little bit more in her background. But I ended up going into, and I liked the idea that you're separating it between a perpetual calendar maybe versus a perennial calendar. But the term typically kind of rolls out that it's perpetual. I ended up going down a very weird rabbit hole because I found a 1919 issue of the Mentor magazine from January 1st. And it was a issue on calendars and almanacs. And the whole idea behind the Mentor magazine, which I'd never heard of before, is learn one thing every day. So I think Katie and I now have a little catchphrase for the DuoDives and for our triptychs. So learn one thing every day. So the magazine, and I say it's a magazine, but it's not in its truest form. It's very, very thin. It's only a handful of pages, and there are no ads. Well, technically there's an ad for the books, but it's the books printed by the magazine. There's no individual ads in here. It is literally all information that ends up giving the background of both calendars and almanacs. So I do have some interesting little things I might drop in through tonight, but the whole reason this got picked was because it is January. We're picking it going into a new year. And so everyone had to go find their new calendars. And now Sam did not because he had a perpetual calendar or a perennial calendar. But in part of the information that I was digging up, and I did not really share any of this with Katie or Sam earlier, so we'll be putting it somewhat on the putting them somewhat on the hot seat as I test them on some of what I discovered. So first, the month of January comes after the Roman god named what?
Oh man.
Bitter.
So, all right, we're not going to last too long. We'll see if we don't know if anyone in the chat will do it. What I found interesting is that this god existed only in Roman era, not Greek. Like usually there's an equivalent, like they both have it.
Mhm.
This one, for whatever reason, there was only a Roman god called Janus. So that is the name of the god that it comes after. It is a Roman god. He was the guardian deity of gates, and he was the porter of the gates of heaven. And he is typically depicted with two faces, one the face of a young child and the other the face of an old man. So kind of representing the whole, just like what you moved into if you watch Katie's triptych on New Year's Eve, you end up having the baby New Year coming in, and it's usually an old man with like a scythe, like death, or like whatever, walking, ending a year. So you've got that actually comes from the original representations of Janus. He was represented or given credit for the origin of all things, introduction of the system of years, the changes of the seasons, and he was also the god of the ups and downs of fortune. So that is where January comes from. And so,
that is fascinating.
Yeah, but only in the Roman era, only in the Roman calendar for the Roman, god system. I don't know if the Greeks had anything that represented kind of the beginning or the end of the seasons or the calendar, but Janus, January, and that's where we are. One of the things, and this is also what Sam was kind of alluding to, is that we don't like a perpetual calendar, just like really a traditional calendar. If you've got one of Vintage Vinny's pinup girl calendars, it's not talking about the phases of the moon. She might be mooning you, but we're not tracking anything. We're not tracking tidal systems. We're not tracking anything of agriculture. It is simply a calendar posted by the year that then has the monthly breakdown. And in calendar definitions, they are broken down into a life calendar versus an astronomical calendar. So the perpetual calendars really don't do anything that covers the astronomical side. Most of the perpetual ones, I don't think even have a way of marking holidays, at least none of the ones that I saw. Maybe you could like put a little figure next to it or something. But in general, July 4th is not going to be indicated by anything. It's just going to say 4, and you're going to manually do July. Right. But the astronomical calendar, this is another pop quiz, is if you actually track the astronomical calendar, which has been done for thousands of years, how long is an astronomical calendar? How many days are in an astronomical calendar?
I'm assuming the answer is not 365.
It is not. It is close, but there is it's one of those cases like when you start thinking about it, there's a reason for leap year.
Okay.
So an actual calendar year is actually 365 days, 5 hours, 48 minutes, and 46 seconds long. So it's basically 365 and a quarter days long, which is why then leap year. Then Ronnie D actually came up exactly with the right. And you didn't have to get into the 5 hours, 48 minutes, 46 seconds. That was just, trust me, I didn't know that. I'd look that one up. But you basically have to. That's why leap year pops in, because you're trying to accommodate that quarter of a day. Right. And if you go back in time, it's fascinating how that has been handled in the past, because this is something that's been known way longer than I thought it was. So the first calendars attributed to the Akkadians, which were the earliest residents of Babylonia, 6000 BC. And that's still the calendar used in by some cultures, the Chinese culture. When you hear someone's born in the year 4600 or whatever, it's because it's based on one of those earliest calendars. They never reset it. interesting tidbit that I came across as we get into the details. Didn't mean to like throw this all out at one time, but hey, I'm on a roll. I'm just going to do it. So Romans, when they started their calendar, they did not have a first day of the month or a second day of the month. So they wouldn't have known how to work a perpetual calendar, literally, because they did not use this is the first day or the second day or the third day. They had terms that represented points of the calendar, including a point called Ides. They had a nut. No, that can't be right. The calends, nonas, and Ides. Those were the terms that they had. And I'm looking up why my handwriting says nut, because I don't think that's right. Not 1, 2, 3. That's what it says. Okay, I can't even read my own handwriting. So calends was the first day of the month. Nonas was the 5th day of the month. And pop quiz, when was the Ides?
Well, I would think in March.
Oh, they happen in every month.
I want to say
which day of the month? What was it?
Oh, which day?
The 15th.
There you go. Okay, I'm 1 for 3.
There you go. All right, and that's the reason anyone would even remotely know this is exactly what Soul Nate just put in. I've always heard of the Ides of March. I always knew the Ides of March were the 15th, but I never knew where that term came from. So the 15th is the Ides, and now, again, Nate, being ridiculously impressive to everyone, also is stating a correct statement. There were some months of the year that the Ides were the 13th. So how Nate knew this, I do not know. But regardless, Nate is amazing. So the Ides were usually the 15th, or usually the Nonas were the 5th. So when they would track the date, it was like the 14th day before the calends. So they didn't have 1, 2, 3. They had how many days away from these other major marks? Why? I do not know, but that's what they did. So those are so the Roman calendar started out. There are 2 major types of calendars. I'm feeling Sam might know this. Let's do it a little bit easier. Julius Caesar basically structured one of the early calendars. What's that calendar called?
Ooh. I feel like I've heard this somewhere, and I just don't know what it is.
Julian.
There you go.
Good job, Sam.
The Julian calendar. So I just found this stuff interesting. It really has almost nothing to do with perpetual calendars. But if we just showed Sam's 2 calendars, my 1 and Katie's 2, we would have been done by now. So I found some additional information. So the Julian calendar, Julius Caesar created it. He was the one that kind of created the concept of alternating between 30 and 31 days per month. And he created February having 29 days. And he introduced the concept of the leap year. Now, what happened a little bit after him, Augustus stepped in, and the month of August only had 30 days. And he's like, screw that. I am emperor. I'm going to have 31 days. So he stole another day out of February and added it into August. So that's why August now is 31 days, and February dropped down to 28th. So that was where that happened. But if you go back and do the math, it's roughly 365 and a quarter days for the year, but it's actually a little bit longer than that, or no, a little bit shorter than that. No, which one was it? A little bit shorter than that. So what ended up happening over thousands of years, that extra like 10 minutes added up to 10 days of a spread in the calendar, and Pope Gregory stepped in because that suddenly meant that some of the agricultural things, and, some of the celebrations suddenly weren't falling in the point of the calendar year where they were supposed to, because they were literally had all just been shifting slightly. So Pope Gregory created the altogether class. What calendar?
Gregorian.
There you go. The Gregorian calendar in 1582. And in 1582, he just like lopped 10 days off the calendar. He's like, we don't need those. So we just skipped those. Everyone had a birthday. You didn't have a birthday that year because they're gone. Most of the Catholic countries followed the Gregorian calendar at that time.
Mhm.
Biggest exception, because they were not Catholic, was the UK. They did not adopt
Oh,
that
that
calendar.
makes sense.
So for a couple, 100 years, they were literally working under a different calendar than like France. So you kind of had this separation. And so in 1752, pretty damn late, the UK finally said, okay, fine, we're going to adjust. We're going to move to the Gregorian calendar. By that time, they were 11 days off, not 10. They were 11. So the decision was made on September 2nd that tomorrow is September 14th. So anything that happened that was supposed to happen between September 3rd and September 13th did not exist. It just jumped to the 14th. So you will, and I have seen this, like this is because it's kind of within recordable history. When you start looking at 18th century literature or anything, any sort of history, you will see references sometimes to the fact that if it happened before or after 1752, because depending on the date, if the date mattered, you had to know, well, it was before this or after that, because that was when that calendar got adjusted. So
interesting.
Crazy times. And there's this super bizarre ruling with the way the Gregorian calendar is structured now that says, and I should have written it down, but it basically announces that leap year will happen every 4 years, except when the number of that year is divisible by 400. So the year 2000, yes, okay. Except you will have a leap year every year unless the year is not divisible. No. Okay, let's put it this way. 1600 was a leap year. 2000 was a leap year. Completely by coincidence, because nobody would have known this freaking rule. But 1700, 1800, and 1900 were not leap years. So that is because the rule was created with the Gregorian calendar about this divisible by 400 thing, so that you don't end up having that shift of that extra like 10 minutes building on, every year. That helps account it every 400 or every 400 years. So I didn't know that. And I wasn't around in 1900. I probably won't be around in 2100. But so the year in 2100, the year 2100, there will not be a leap year. So that'll be the next time that there will not be a leap year. So that was just like one of those little weird things, because mathematically that's what they were trying to correct.
Totally fascinating.
So Nate is asking when the Gregorian calendar came in. So Pope Gregory did all of his stuff in 1582. So that was technically when the Gregorian calendar was introduced, but the UK did not do it until 1752. So quite a bit, 150 years later.
Which is really interesting, Patrick, because in 1762, that's when Thomas Mudge actually invented the first perpetual calendar watch.
Oh, so fantastic.
That's really cool. Now, he made the first watch, but it wasn't until 1925 that a different man, Patrick Philippe, actually invented the first perpetual wristwatch. And then in 1940, they started making more wristwatches with the movement, but it wasn't until 1960 that you had the first automatic perpetual watch. And now they're very, very popular.
So how did what's the definition of a perpetual calendar in the watch world? Because that normally wouldn't have had a year on it. So what exactly is it going to progress?
So those things can track different things. They have a series of levers and dials. So you have like a date dial, and then you might have the day, you might have the month on it, and then it also would track moon phases. Some of those earlier ones can track all kinds of things, and they account for the leap year. So it's not like a regular watch that just has the day movement where you can just turn the dial on the side and it rotates through, pretty much similar to these where you just have the day movement, you can flip it and it changes.
Right.
Those actually are tracking themselves. So
really? I didn't know that existed to that level.
A much more complicated movement.
I would say so. I've had some cheap watches. Well, not all of them are cheap, but just like you said, the day progressed along with the hours, but then if there was only 30 days in the month, you just had to manually advance it past 31 to get it to 1. So like, I would still consider a perpetual calendar. I had no idea that they would have that level of sophistication in something so small. That's fantastic.
So they would track all kinds of things. And so if the day movement would move, then it would change a lever, and you can watch videos on it. It's absolutely fascinating. But some of the earlier watches are very expensive if you want to collect those with the perpetual calendars. But I find them fascinating because the level of detail in just a regular automatic watch is amazing. But then you add the perpetual calendar part to it, and it's a whole nother thing that's just really cool.
So how much I don't really do anything with any sort of collectible watches or high-end watches, but do you have any idea of like what would the cost difference be between like a Patek Philippe standard watch versus a Patek Philippe perpetual calendar watch?
Well, a lot of his perpetual calendar watches in 1925 were by commission only. So those are like selling. I saw one on Sotheby's, I think, go for 26 grand, if not more. So some of them are very expensive. I don't know if he made watches, so I don't know if he did any other particular ones that were more mass marketed or not. But I'm sure that they're still very expensive because he's a big name. And
well, Patek Philippe, just a standard watch is going to cost thousands. So I was just curious. So 28,000 on top. Yeah, I could see that being a jump, because that meant the all of the controls in that I just have to be machined to such detail to try to account for it. I'm fascinated by what would account for a leap year. Like how on earth?
I don't know how they figure that out.
No, I'm like, first of all, that also has to assume that you always wind the watch.
Well, that's what I was going to ask.
It's like that watch ever stops being wound, you're totally screwed. So that's actually interesting.
Yeah, you have to keep it wound, and then of course, if it runs out or there's something wrong with it, you have to take it in for service, which is a whole nother thing.
Well, and that was my question too, is like, does it come from the factory knowing what day it is, or do you have to you buy it and then you set it to the day and then it goes forever kind of thing?
Yeah, because I mean, if they ship it to you, is it wound? Does it stay wound the entire time it's shipping? That's fascinating.
If it's an automatic watch, because it moves the way that it's shipped, because the rotor is constantly moving, it should keep it wound. So I do believe that they set it at the factory. But some of the earlier watches, I don't know. That's a very good question.
But if I'm spending $28,000 on a watch, I expect a little human to show up and wind it for me every day.
Yeah.
Because that's insane.
And I want a really nice watch winder with it too.
There you go. Now, you showed your perpetual watch or your perpetual calendar when you showed your indicator. It seems similar to what Sam had shown. Now, that one it's got the same map, and it looks like it's got kind of the same base to it. Was yours also the promotional piece from the Sunset magazine?
No, that's interesting. So this one doesn't have any inscription on it. And I did find some of these when I was doing research for this that didn't have any type of inscription, but I did find others that were not just like the one Sam showed, but they were for other companies that did all kinds of different things. So what I'm wondering, and I don't 100% know this, is if this was manufactured like for a catalog where you could order something with your company name or inscription on it as an advertising piece. I'm not 100% sure, but it has the dials on the side that you move. You can change the day.
And then those are called the windy bits.
Yeah, the
little windy bits. Yep, I remember the technical terms.
That's the best way. And then, of course, it's got the same, you can go through like that. And sometimes, like Sam was saying, it does get jammed.
Yeah, it looks like your number 7 looks a little jammed right now.
Yeah, it gets jammed, so they're not perfect. Let's see. There we go. I got it working. And it does go through, and it's got the same, when you get down to 1. Let's see if I go the right way. Okay, I think this is totally jammed up, but it does have the same little pieces that Sam was showing in the back that says flip slowly. Let's see if it does it now.
And then to advance the month when you get to the end. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it has all of that, and they do get stuck.
And yours has you also would be changing the day of the week each time then too. That was one of the little spinny bits or whatever windy bits we were at. Okay. So the month and the day. Okay.
And then
Now, one of the things that Sam and I were discussing in advance was you mentioned the advertising piece, because since he does have it as an advertising piece, that I find it from a fascinating, the huckster side of me, that in some cases I am surprised that perpetual calendars would be used as advertising pieces because it doesn't build in the obsolescence. If you do one of Vinny's pinup calendars for a drugstore or for Coca-Cola or 7-Up or whatever, you have to get another calendar. At the end of the year, you need to know, well, what's Miss January going to look like, because you can't just reuse the same calendar. So you have built in, I know I had a series, I think Katie had some too. We had a series of ink blotters. I had some dated back to the 20s, and each one only had 1 month. So the idea was you had the blotter for that month, but the next month you had to go back and get another one. So you had to go shopping again. You had to go back to that store and get another blotter. So the idea of the perpetual calendars, I'm kind of curious when those stepped in from an advertising side versus not. All right, so there's the change month aspect. I do have one as well. I picked this up specifically for the DuoDive. Mine is also not an advertising piece. This was just a little decorative, just a piece of plastic. I do not know the era from this. There's 2 dials on the back that would spin it. The one with the little, kind of has a little ledge to make it a little bit easier to spin. The outer one is the one that advances the date. And then there's a smaller one in the middle, which is very difficult because you have to kind of, have friction to grab it, but you only have to change it once a month. You have to manually change. So there's nothing that would indicate as you spin it around that the month would go with it. They turn completely independently. I think there's something wrong with this one because it looks like it's kind of styled like an old-fashioned clock. And I have a feeling this is somehow supposed to prop itself out so that it would sit, but I think it's missing a piece. Of course, that was not described in the description when I bought it. So, I could hang it. I can turn it into a hanger hanging on a wall. But so this was I think Sam had said some of them are even simpler. This one doesn't even get into the days of the week. This is literally just spin the day, and you've got the month on there each time. So you'd have a quick reference, on your desk. I think that's where a lot of these were designed for. Because I think even the ones that you guys showed, some of the ones that I saw when I was looking to buy one for the DuoDive, I saw that little advanced mechanism, which I think is totally cool, but they were attached to more of like a marble base, and it was like it held a pen or it had a business card holder or both. And sometimes there was a little medallion or something on that said an advertising, or it was a commemorative piece. So one of the ones I'm wondering, we didn't really talk about this, but the 2 that you have, I'm assuming, Sam, since yours is specifically a promotional piece, and I think you said you even got the box with it. Yes. Yours is probably finished on the bottom. Katie's, is yours finished? Because I'm wondering, I wouldn't want a big desk thing. I just think those are cool if you break it off, if you could sell them. Okay, so yours is like a little felt thing. So that's
this one is actually cardboard. But my felt is missing. So, Sam, I think yours has the felt, but I can see the edge here. It has a tiny little bit of felt. My other one is finished with felt and cardboard, and it's got a sticker. And what I can make out is it says made in Japan, but then I feel like there is some other name on it. So I don't know if this was sold in a set or not, because I did find this one where you could buy it, and then there was like a pin holder that looked very similar, but they weren't connected on the base. So I don't know if you could buy these as like little office sets in catalogs or not. And also the advertising ones, I'm kind of wondering too if companies gave them as gifts. Like, Coca-Cola gave a lot of their bottlers special pieces for being there for so long or doing certain work or things like that.
I guess, and actually now that you say that way, to a certain extent, I guess if you have a perpetual calendar and it says Coca-Cola or 7-Up or Sunset Magazine, well, you'll never get rid of it because you'll have it forever. So maybe from an advertising perspective, those are even better because you're not going to take it down. I don't know. That's actually an interesting approach. I hadn't really thought about it from that way. That maybe the fact that they're perpetual made them more desirable. But I will say I struggled to find interesting ones, and I also struggled to find reasonably priced ones.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're expensive.
So yeah, I was just gonna say, so like, none of us have a huge collection of them, but what are you finding if you were to the next one you add to your collection, Sam? What would you want to add? What style? Would it be another advertising piece, or what would be the next thing that you would add?
There's one that I had seen sort of recently. It's I think probably from like the 1960s or the 1970s. It's just like a very ornate sort of looking Russian one, and I don't speak Russian, but I thought the idea of it just was kind of cool. Like it's relative. It was kind of large, I would say maybe like that big, and it just looked very Soviet almost, very brutalist, and I was like, that's really cool. But it was like with shipping, it was like $70, and I was like, I like this a lot. This is really cool, but I'm not about to spend $70 on it
For something you're not going to be able to read afterwards.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What's fascinating is if you do know how to read the Cyrillic alphabet, which I do know how to do, I can no longer speak Russian, but I can still make out and figure out the letters, is the months are actually very similar to what we know. So as long as you can, sound out the letters, you can actually figure out which month it's actually trying to say. Like October literally is October. It's just spelled slightly different. Even if you don't know Cyrillic, it looks similar because it starts with an O, and then it looks like a K, and then it looks like a T, and it looks like an O. It actually looks like October. So, it's one of those fun things. But the different languages, I think, I find them more interesting. Like I got the tea canister collection, like the ones I want to add are the ones that actually spell tea in a different way. Because it's only 3 letters. Like, how much can you change it? But I actually have like 3 or 4 different versions of it. Just trying to do the different, because I know they all say tea, they're just not the language that I speak. But if you were to add another one, Katie, would you be going after a watch perpetual calendar, or would you be, what kind of perpetual calendar are you looking for? Is there a Coca-Cola one you got your eyes on?
I don't know that Coca-Cola actually made any of them. I don't think they did, but I saw some advertising ones that I thought were really cool. And there's one for there's different companies that did like tobacco, tea. I think I even saw a spice one, if I'm not mistaken. And I don't really have a collection of spice or other type of advertising tins in that food genre, but it was really cool because the whole tin rotated. Like it was a tin canister, and then it had the calendar on the side with the paper insert, kind of this like brown laminated paper, and then you would rotate it. And I just think that's really cool. So any of the advertising ones I'm kind of fascinated by, because I love advertising and I think they would be great. Yeah, I don't know if Jello did one, but maybe I need to
I'm going to look out for it. The style
also
that I was actually hoping to buy, because I would have kept it for myself, I only found a couple of examples, and each one, unfortunately, was not complete. They're still considered perpetual calendars. They're more like a desk monument style, where it's kind of got a frame to it. And what's in there is a stack of basically like cardstock paper. And on the each side of the paper, each piece would have 4, like for the months, it would have 4 names on it. It would say January at the top, and then in reverse on the bottom, it'd say February. And then on the flip side, it would have March and April. So you'd need 3 of those cards that you could then organize. And there was a little slot at the top of the frame that you'd put the month. And then there was another set of cards that has every possible combination of a 30 and 31 day month and a 28-day month. Leap year, you're just screwed. But you have to have many of these because they're double-sided. But you've got 7 options for a 31-day month, because the first could be on a Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And you need to have 7 versions of a 30-day month. And to be able to flip them, I can never find one that's complete. They never say they're incomplete, but I found one at an antique store and I started flipping through it. And it literally only had like five of the month options, and only I think 1 page of the month names. So it's like, okay, that's not very perpetual. I can only celebrate 4 months of the year. And they happen to fall on one of those days. So those I think are super cool, because I am ridiculously lazy. The idea that I'm going to sit there and remember to flip a calendar every day to remember what day it is, I'd be writing checks for the wrong date every day because I forgot to spin it. So I like being able to see that whole month. And so the idea of just being able to, okay, the first fell on a Tuesday, find the right card and slide it in there. I find that fascinating. But they're hard to come by. And if they're complete, they're super expensive, because they're usable, and it's like the other ones are cheaper because they're basically not usable. And you can say they're decorative, but decorative for what? You know, if it's not going to give you the right date, what are you really putting in there? Because you can turn it into a picture frame. But
now my grandma had a perpetual calendar, Sam, similar to your one from the Modern Art Museum, but it was big, and it was about like this tall.
Yep.
And about this wide, and it had little blocks, and you could rotate them in and out. And she still has it in her kitchen, but some of the blocks actually have, there was a set of blocks that came on the bottom that were just painted with different holidays. So they had a St. Patrick's Day clover. I think there's like a flag for the 4th of July, and then you could put those in next to the ones. So I've seen those. Those are probably like 70s or 80s, I would imagine. And I don't
a lot of those
technically are perpetual calendars, but
and that style is very popular, even common era. Like when I started looking for them, if I didn't specify antique or vintage, you found all kinds of school calendar ones. Where you had like the big sheet, the big poster board with just a grid, and you put the numbers up there. And same thing, you'd have like a little thing for St. Patrick's Day. You replaced when is St. Patrick's Day, the 14th, 13th? I don't even know. You take the 17th. Okay. You take that number out and put in the actual St. Patrick's Day little card. So those are perpetual calendars. So we see them all the time. When I started prepping this one and Sam showed me his block one, I'm like, dude, that's not a perpetual calendar, but it is. It's a simple one.
Right.
And I'm like, we had one of those at the quilt shop that we had when my ex-wife and I owned a business. We set it up on the counter because people that were writing checks never knew what day it was. So we literally had this stupid little calendar, and I think it had a bunny on it. It was something ridiculous. And each, you just flip the numbers. And if we forgot to flip them, we were told like, nope, that's not today's date.
Yep.
So they're not rare, but if you get interesting ones, those are the ones that people want. And I don't know if there's like even Sam, who started this by saying, yes, I'm a collector. I collect these. How big is your collection going to be? At some point, I don't know if people truly collect these or people are just buying them because I want one and it's going to be functional and I think it's kind of cool. I did see one in an antique shop once, and I was looking for an example of it, even on WorthPoint, and I couldn't find it. I do believe it was vintage, and it was just from a structural standpoint. I will say it wasn't well thought out, but conceptually it was very cool. It had a vertical grid or kind of an opening, a frame. Let's just say that it was made out of wood. It had a vertical frame that's hung on the wall. In the frame, there were 3 slots that 3 pieces of wood fit into, and each piece of wood had 1 through 30. One of the pieces of wood had 1 through 31. The other piece of wood had Sunday through Saturday, and the other piece of wood had the 12 months. And you literally just slid each bar so that whatever fell in the window was, Wednesday, January 5th, whatever, Wednesday, January, and then the 5. The problem was the way this one was designed, I do think it was vintage, is at any point, once you got to like the 30th, the whole calendar just started like hanging. You had to bounce it on the wall securely. Otherwise, you couldn't just hang it on a nail because it was not going to be weight corrective once you got to a very either end. So, but I remember finding it. I thought it was very cool. I didn't have any place to use it, so I didn't buy it. It was one of those regrets, and I've yet to see another one. So I just think those are super
always
cool.
happen.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess they're rare. I don't know. Have you seem to know what I was talking about, Sam? Have you seen one of those before?
Well, one of the buildings I used to work in had one mounted on the wall, and the security guard would always be changing it. So I know what you're talking about. But I was thinking more about this one, the one that Katie and I have. I think, like I said, I think these are very 1960s. And a lot of the ones that I've seen online are very much souvenir pieces. And they all have these very similar mid-century 1960s vibe to them. The ones I just was looking really quickly, it's like Niagara Falls, like Pikes Peak, like a Texas rodeo. And to me, this goes sort of back to that thing you were talking about, that like do I want this? Like, what am I going to do with this in a year? Like, and to me, it's sort of why I also collect menus. Like, it's it's like a very small, discrete thing that you did at one point, and it's like a good memory. And so it also, this one happens to have a little bit more function than a menu does. But I think that's sort of where I sort of see the collectability. Again, I'm not going to collect 20 of these. If I do, someone come stop me. But like, it's a fun, it's fun kind of memory, I would say, with it.
That's true.
And I agree, Vinny. The Florida one is very mid-century modern. I saw that on eBay, and I thought that was pretty cool. It had a flamingo and a palm tree. So, again, memories of your trip to Florida.
Yeah,
that's true. So the only other thing I wanted to cover that we kind of skipped over was we kind of went into things, to me, went down like a weird rabbit hole of all the like scientific background. But we kind of started talking about the semantics of a perpetual calendar. There is another definition of a perpetual calendar. I know Sam ended up doing a little bit of research on it. I got smacked in the face with it when I did this, when I got this magazine. And that's the idea of a perpetual calendar, or it's at least called a perpetual calendar, that you can utilize to determine what day of the week that a date happened. And so, Sam, do you want to talk anything about that, or what you came across when you that kind of perpetual calendar?
Yeah. So this is like, I think, sort of the easy way, because you can, as we've talked a little bit about before, there's like a whole algebraic expression that you can use to determine what day of the week and what month and what year, and nobody has time for that. So this one sort of tells you that this calendar, the calendar that we use every day, resets basically every 28 years. So you'll know that, like, in the year 1990, it's a great year, just saying, it's the same calendar as 1962 and as 2018, because every 28 years you're going to reset. And not only every 28 years are you going to reset, but those calendars, each month also follows the same Sunday to Saturday to Sunday pattern that it did 28 years prior. And so I think that's kind of interesting.
And that's so what I found is kind of funny, like you said, the every 20, 30 year. Okay, so now let's do your basic. You're the one that shows up in chats a lot. That says when anyone shows a calendar, you're like, oh, that's the same year as this. So I think you had already done the research prior to this. So we were in 2022. So if somebody wanted to try and find an old calendar and use the same days of the month or days of the week that match here, what year calendar would they need to be looking for?
All right, the calendars you'd be looking for that match 2022 are 1994, 1966, 1938, and 1910. So if you have any of those calendars sitting around, I'm sure you all do.
Absolutely. All the hoarders are digging through their stacks right now. Like, I finally got a use for that 1994 calendar.
Exactly.
I probably got some in my ephemeral.
And if you buy a calendar this year with grand plans to, plan your life out, and, it really doesn't happen that way, don't fear. You can use it again in 2050.
There you go. See, a reason to hoard. You just keep on holding on to things. So one of the things, and this is a little bit of a variation from what Sam was talking about. This is the back of that Mentor magazines from 1919. And so what this one does is it gives what they call a perpetual calendar. But this is giving you a breakdown, kind of that algebraic breakdown, to say if you wanted to match or find out which day of the week a certain date and year landed on, you had to do this little cross-reference thing. And what's interesting to me about this is it only goes up to the year 2000. So this was from 1919. So they're like, oh, that's, why would you go any further? But they said it's very easy to expand either higher or lower, based on the math. I couldn't figure it out, but I guess you could. And so this is what threw me when I first started prepping for a discussion on quote unquote perpetual calendars. I did not know that this concept of just trying to figure out what day of the week something fell in, basically something we could Google in 5 seconds, that is actually falls into the idea of a perpetual calendar listing. And there are listings that I'd found, actual listings like on eBay when I was trying to look for perpetual calendars that kind of use this in a physical form and created a perpetual calendar, but it would say it's only valid for 20 years or it's only valid for 30 years. And it would say right on there, from 1950 to 2000 or something like that. I don't know why, like at some point, wouldn't it just return it? But for however they built them up, that it was the idea that this was a very specific set of time that perpetual calendar is good for. I don't know. I didn't pick up any of those because I didn't understand them. So
I saw
that is another definition.
And it was very confusing. I was trying to figure out how you work them, what they are, how they, and because again, like Patrick said, you're able to Google these things. So for you actually trying to use the algebraic equation to figure this out, it's like, why?
I figured out how to do it with this weird chart. And then I had friends over and we were going and I was showing it to them. And I'm like, oh yeah. And then this is what I literally couldn't do it again. I had to like reread the instructions. Like, wait, no, I can do this. Like I did this once. I should be able to do it. It's like maybe back in 1919, people were smarter because half of this magazine I barely understood. And so I guess the idea of the Mentor magazine was you were smart and you could figure this out. But the concept, okay, it's a perpetual calendar, wasn't really what I'm looking for. So actually, this magazine is currently listed on my eBay channel. I'm selling it again. Like there is no need for me to keep this. But there was some interesting stuff. All the information about Janus and all of the Julian and the Gregorian calendars all came out of this. And then there's a whole other section on almanacs that I just absolutely skipped because I'm like, yep, I don't even want to touch on that because that is a whole nother world. It gets into that whole agricultural and the phases of the moons and all that kind of stuff. So like, yeah, we're not going to talk about that. But I think we've each shown our collections, mine of one. Did you have any others that you were going to show, Katie?
Well, I wanted to ask Sam if he had ever seen one of these, because this one actually has 2 dials or tourney things on the side. So this one controls, and this one gets jammed a lot. So you have to hold the one that you want to turn. Otherwise it turns the others. But it controls the different ones. So I want to know if Sam.
Oh, so it's 3 dials, but there's only or 3 spinny things, but there's only 2 dials.
Yeah. So this one rotates.
No, I have never seen one like that before.
And then you turn this dial here, and it should control. Now it's controlling all 3, but it should just control that one, one number, and then this side. It's hard to get just right. And then this one controls the days of the week.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really interesting. Now, I don't know as far as repair, like if I were to kind of pry this back and see if I could lubricate or fix that. I don't know, but it's.
And you think that's from Japan? Is that what the sticker says, you think?
Yeah, it says made in Japan. And then there's some other little shield looking mark on the bottom. I bought this from a seller in Canada. Lyrics Vintage over on Instagram. And so I don't know if these are a Canadian thing per se that were imported or not. And
so what era do you think that one's from?
I was just going to ask because you both know sort of where things were manufactured based on like that. So I was very curious about that.
Well, with
looking at it, I would have said 40s, but if it says made in Japan, it can't be 40s. It's got to be 30s.
Yeah, it has to be older. I mean, I could be
might even be 20s
because it's really, the sticker's gone, but I'm pretty sure that says made in Japan. So I think it's got to be earlier because that's got the earlier mark. And it does have these little things that I find interesting is unlike this one, which is metal on the inside here. These are like a paper board and they're laminated.
And there's nothing protecting it. Those are just windows, or is there glass or plastic? Okay.
So see, I can go in and not that I'm trying to destroy my calendar, but I thought that was really interesting. So I don't 100% know how old this is, but again, with the made in Japan mark, if that's what I am reading, because it is hard to read, then it's got to be earlier than the 40s. But to me, it looks very 40s.
Yeah, so, just as a picture, I would have said that. So interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I see these online, but I see them paired like with other things. So again, I don't know if this came as a whole set or not, but they do seem to be going for some money.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen one that specific shape.
Yeah.
Because that just has kind of a cool, sexy shape to it. But I've seen things that are like that again are mounted on a bigger piece of marble and more as like a desk set as opposed to just a standalone calendar, which I'm sure was a thing, too.
I saw one with a starburst carved into it with the whole desk set, and it was going for like $65 or something like that.
So Cheryl is asking, is you tried to one dial clockwise and the other counterclockwise?
Oh, I don't know. Let's see. No. Well, maybe that's fixing. Sort of. Maybe. And then it's interesting because it just has a blank. So like this one, it's different than some of the other ones I've seen where they would have had a 0 here.
Yeah.
Oh, so you don't have a 0 for that?
No, it's just a blank.
Okay.
Interesting.
Which is really, really interesting. So
it's also interesting that the way that one is ordered is also, again, you bought it in Canada, but it's also ordered in like the non-American way of writing.
Yeah, like a European listing. You're right, with the date before the month.
It's backwards for us anyway, which is
how does Canada do their dates? Do they put the number before the month?
I am not Canadian, so I can't give it.
Cheryl Ross.
But I would say I think they do it the same way we do.
I honestly do not know. I know I'm used to the European number, then the month and the year, but I can't say that I necessarily have seen it on the on a Canadian to know for sure what they do.
Yeah, I don't know either, so I'm going to have to do some more research on this guy. He's interesting.
Perfect. All right. Well, I think I mean, I'm going to be perfectly honest. We've been here an hour. How did we talk about 5 calendars in an hour? Basically, Katie and I on anything, we'll just talk. So, and Sam had not to say too. So we did care. Oh, Tim could also say we got another Canuck in the house.
Oh yeah.
So genealogists prefer day, then month, then year. But he's saying genealogists prefer that. So
yeah, I don't know, Tim. That's interesting.
And Cheryl's saying it's all over the place and it's frustrating. And it absolutely would be frustrating because if it's fine if you're going to spell out like that one, you've got Katie, it says Feb, so you know that that's obviously a month. But when somebody sits there and starts doing it all numerically and they want to say it's 0202, or well, it doesn't matter, like 0206, or are we June 2nd or are we February 6th? Right. So it makes a big difference to know which way you're going to do it. Like Cheryl says government documents are the worst. So we did. We filled an hour. I'm slightly shocked, but hey, I hope, and we actually had people with us the whole time. So thanks everyone for hanging out with us. I know Sam, life is returning back to normal. You are a crazy person who chooses to run without someone chasing after you. So you probably don't have any more time, but hopefully you do continue to scan your Dining at Sea collection and give us some eye candy for what the rest of your collection looks like. Every time I get a new piece to my collection, I send a picture of it to Sam. It just says your fault because it's entirely Sam's fault that I have this collection. So so I don't know if you've got anything that you are scheduling, so I know you don't have a YouTube channel, but Katie, if you want to talk about what you've got coming up on your YouTube channel.
Oh, absolutely, Patrick. So Tales from the Triptych will return this coming Sunday, and it will be hosted by me on my channel. And I'm really excited because we're doing something a little bit different for Tales from the Triptych. I am actually going to be showcasing my mom's World War II documentary that she did. It's actually an Emmy award-winning special, and I'm really excited to show that. For many of you that don't know, my mom does work at a local news station here. She's an anchor and reporter. She has been for over 30 years, and I'm really excited. She flew to the beaches of Normandy to do this special and interviewed some amazing people that were actually on the beaches of Normandy during the war, and it's just fantastic. So I'm really hoping that this will be interesting. There's a lot of history and a lot of really, really cool footage from France. So this will be great. So this will be
Fantastic.
at 8 o'clock Eastern on my channel this Sunday.
And then the next DuoDive will be hosted by Katie next week, so a week from today. And do you want to talk about who we've got coming up for that? Because we're very excited about that one.
Yes, we are. So we have a very special guest from the show, Bathtubs Over Broadway, which I'm really excited about to come on and talk about.
Which is currently available for free on Netflix. So anybody who has Netflix, Bathtubs Over Broadway, watch the show, and then the guy who created that program is going to be our guest,
which is very exciting, and that will be at 9:30 on Wednesday.
Excellent. My channel, I will be returning for my live sale tomorrow night. So that is, again, I'm still doing a late night live sale, and I've got to figure out what we'll be doing long term, because just found out today that the show I am in has been postponed. So rehearsals are ending for a month, and hopefully we'll start back up again in February. So we shall see. At this point, I don't want to be jumping around back and forth, so I'll probably just be doing a short sale, late night live sale. I am going to be doing something a little bit different that you all get a sneak peek on. I'm going to be doing a different type of mystery box, and tomorrow night's sale, everyone who wants one can have a mystery box. So there will be no grabbing a number. There will be no guessing a number. There'll be no first to claim. If you want one, you get one. So that'll happen tomorrow night at 11 p.m. Eastern. So late night, much later than normal for me. And it'll be a short one because it is so much later. But that'll be happening tomorrow. Then I will be part of the triptych on Sunday and part of the DuoDive on Katie's channel next Wednesday. So thanks, everyone, for hanging out tonight. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you all maybe learned a little something, because we have to figure out how to turn this into our new logo. Learn one thing every day.
I love that.
We hopefully all learned maybe even more than one thing today, but hope you had fun. I really appreciate you joining us again, Sam. Always a pleasure to have you.
Of course.
Yes.
Sorry, Basil did not make an appearance, but I hope she's resting well.
She's somewhere.
And if we come up with another collection, maybe we'll have you on again. You can show us a little bit more of your ship collection.
There we go.
Thanks, everybody, for hanging out. Thanks for putting your trust in Trusty Huckster, and we'll talk to you all again soon.